4, 3, 2, 1. All right, and welcome to our first ever J.E.D.I Lunch Break Live, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Insights in 15 minutes or less. That's right, we won't be here long, but we will be here strong. First, a little bit about me. My name is Holly Holiday. I am your Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Master, and we will be bringing these very short but insightful segments to you every Thursday at lunchtime, at noon Eastern Time, 11 Central Time. And I have been doing this work for more than 20 years. I started out as an employment discrimination attorney, and then moved into politics, and ultimately into the space of workplace culture, where I focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion and justice. And so one of the things that I get most often is, what the frick do all these acronyms mean? We got DEI, we got IDEA, we got J.E.D.I, we got E&I, we got it all. What do all of these letters mean, and what do they add up to? Well, let's start with some of the basics. So typically when we talk about this work, the most common reference you will hear will be diversity, equity, and inclusion, which of course is the acronym DEI. When we talk about diversity, we're really just talking about people. We're talking about all the ways in which people show up, both in their similarities and in their differences. It is an acknowledgement that people come to our workspace differently, that they are not all the same, and that they bring a unique set of skills and attributes and perspectives informed by who they are and how they identify. Then we move on to equity. And equity is really about recognizing diversity. What it really says is that because we acknowledge that people come to the workplace differently, we acknowledge that we need to have some equity in the impacts in which they have and the outcomes in which we see. So it means that we can't always apply exactly the same process to the same people and expect to have similar outcomes. This is an opportunity through equity to focus on our impacts and outcomes instead of the way in which we just use our resources in terms of equality. And then you get to this idea of the A of it all. Not everyone uses A, and some people believe that A is implied in the I. A really stands for accessibility. It could be conceived as a part of both equity and inclusion, but it really is intended to speak to that group of people that find themselves on the outsides of systems because the systems are inaccessible. This particular concept has been championed by the disability or the differently abled community, but frankly applies to anyone who access has really been the key problem. And then finally, and then next we want to deal with inclusion. And when we talk about inclusion, we're really talking about systems here. We're not just talking about all the people being in a room together. That is not inclusion. That is togetherness, but it is not inclusion. Inclusion really comes when the system invites full participation from everybody who's a part of your team, so that they feel comfortable, they feel welcomed, they feel like they can participate at their fullest capacity. Inclusion is really about how the systems support the way in which your diverse team is equitably treated. And then if you're like me, probably one of the most important things to be thinking about is justice. And this is why I am considered the J.E.D.I master, because my clients, which are largely nonprofits who are really those people, I call them, these are the people who are trying to save the world. These are the people who work hard every day to make your lives better across a range of different issues and topics. Those tend to be my clients. And justice is important because justice says that we're not only trying to deal with making sure that we have different people and different perspectives, that we're not just trying to make sure that we have a workplace that is equitable and fair. We're not just trying to create systems that are inclusive. We want to be removing those root causes that create that inequity in the first place, that address why we deal with each other differently. Essentially, by using a justice frame, what you are really saying is we want to do away with supremacy culture. Now, most of us are familiar with the term of supremacy as it relates to race, but supremacy culture has actually been replicated to deal with marginalizing a whole host of identities. Here's how I think about it. When you are operating from a supremacy culture, what you're really doing is operating in a space of scarcity. What it says is only a few people can have this stuff, can have power, can have freedom of expression, can feel included, can feel as though they can contribute. That's a scarcity model. And it relies on other people not being able to contribute. It relies on this concept that everyone is not going to be able to get to the table or contribute or play fairly or have power. Flip that on its head. What's the opposite of that? And what is real justice? Justice is about shared power and abundance. What it says is that when I have power and I share power with others, we have more power together. What it says is that when I have a space where I'm inclusive of your perspective and your ideas, our ideas are better. Our ideas are more intentional. Our ideas are more powerful and more successful together than they would be if I simply went on my own power and steam. And so for me, the justice part of the work is the most important and helps to frame how we start to look at diversity, the people, equity, the fairness, and inclusion, the systems. And so which one should you be using? Well, that's really up to you. And it's really about what you want to communicate. You know, when I think about diversity, equity, inclusion, it's really not about what you call it. It's really understanding that this is just a part of how you are creating positive workplace culture for your organization. And it's good to start thinking about things from a much broader standpoint. So whether you call it DEI, IDEA, J.E.D.I, E&I, or some other acronym, the main thing for you to be thinking about is how you are empowering your team to feel seen, to feel heard, to have a sense of belonging. But most importantly, how to contribute to your mission, how to contribute to the work that you've hired them to do, to have them feel comfortable enough to bring the brilliance that you've hired them for and make sure that that is working together with their teammates to produce what you hope that they will produce. You know, another thing to think about here is how do you begin to kind of break some of this stuff down? Well, it really starts with understanding what kind of organization you are, what your purpose is, why it's important to you, how it interfaces with your mission. When you start to think about these things and these intersections, then you are halfway there to figuring out which kind of program works best for you. It could be that you're most interested in having different perspectives at the table. And that's where you want to start. And that's the diversity of it all, that you really want to focus in on how to bring those different perspectives and people to the table. And that you've been real clear about identifying who those people are. Perhaps what you recognize is that you have a lot of different voices at the table, but unfortunately, you're not really getting the benefit of those voices. That may be an equity or an inclusion issue. You need to think about, are there some systemic barriers within your policies or within your culture that you need to look at that may be inhibiting voices, particularly voices that may be non-traditional in your organization or institution? Perhaps it is, in fact, the systems themselves. Perhaps you have inherent biases in the system that you didn't realize that, again, are suppressing those voices of people who are not part of the typical system. And then maybe it's a justice issue. Maybe you just simply need to think about how you are empowering your team at every level to be and do their absolute best. Well, whichever way it is, just know that at Holiday Advisors, we work with organizations and institutions to help them figure it all out with the purpose of creating inclusive workplaces where everyone is allowed to bring their best selves, their best work, and their best brilliance to the table. It has been a pleasure being with you. I promised you 15 minutes or less, and I'm going to be true to my word. I want to let you know that we will be here each and every week. Next week's topic, we're going to dig into this idea and the struggle between whether you how you want to create your more diverse team. So next week's topic will be specifically about diversity. And that struggle, that infamous question that I get asked by so many of my clients: how do we choose between the best candidate and the diversity that we seek? Well, I have an answer for that. So join me back here next week, Thursday at noon Eastern Time. This has been your J.E.D.I Lunch Break Live, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Insights in 15 minutes or less. Join me next Thursday for a new edition of J.E.D.I Lunch Break Live right here on LinkedIn.